What's up, everybody? Well, I'm underneath my bus right now and I got to do some greasing, so I might as well run over a couple of things you're going to need before I show you how I do all this. The first thing you're really going to want, mechanic style gloves, okay? Something lightweight, rubber palms and stuff like that. This turns into a dirty job. The next thing you're going to need is a rag of some sort, whether it be microfiber or not, it doesn't really matter, but you just need this so you can clean off the grease zerks. The next thing you're gonna need is a grease gun. You know, something kind of like this right here. You're gonna need one of these so that you can go ahead and do your greasing and all that stuff. And then when it comes to grease, it's really your preference. I prefer this Multiplex 220 number 2. It works really good. If not, it's red and tacky, but honestly, pretty much any grease will work. You just basically want to grease it all up. So when it comes to greasing grease zerks, you have to pay attention to a couple of things, okay? One, you got to make sure that they don't have any rubber boot seals on them like they do on Jeeps, because if they do have a rubber boot seal and you overpack that seal with grease, you're going to blow the seal and you need to get new seals. And in some Jeeps, sometimes that involves probably replacing the entire steering rod system. My Jeep particularly, it's not really easy to go ahead and replace those things. So I'm very, very careful about it. Plus, on top of that, it's kind of one of those things, like some of them are blown up and I'm just like, whatever, I just grease them a little more than normal. So when you're looking at something like this, you can see I've got this grease zerk right here, okay? And there's usually one grease zerk per section that pivots, and it's all gummy and stuff like that. So the first thing you want to do is you want to take your rag and you want to clean that grease zerk off. You don't want any dirt or dust or any grime on that grease zerk because you don't want to push that in, okay? And then after that, these grease guns, they usually have a head on them that locks. So when you pop them into place, they have a tendency to lock on the zerk. That way you can go ahead and do this all one-handed. And so usually what I'll do is I'll give that a little squeeze just to get all that nasty grease out of it in case it was touching something, and then just put that anywhere. You know, it doesn't really matter, it's just a little drop. But then you take your grease gun and you plug it onto your zerk like that. You notice how it doesn't want to go anywhere? Now I can go ahead and pump it. Now you want to listen for air popping, or you want to see the grease just a little bit, okay? You don't want to overdo this because then it ends up being one big mess, all right? So make sure you listen for popping, and you'll hear the air kind of pop and crickle and crackle, and then as soon as it stops, you're pretty much as you're gonna need. So I'm gonna go ahead and grease this one real quick. There's one. Okay, so that only took 7 pumps. And these are kind of a pain to get off sometimes. You kind of got to twist them a little bit or kind of pry them, and then they'll pop off, okay? So that's how you basically grease the grease zerks. Now I'm going to go around the entire bus and point out and talk about the different areas and then get them greased, all right? So I'll see you guys in a second. I got to take one of these gloves off though. That's the bummer about these gloves. When you're trying to do videos and stuff, they don't really work that well because you can't hit the button. So see you in a sec. Now, one of the other areas that you got to worry about is your suspension system, okay? Now some of these will have a 90-degree grease zerk, so it'll basically be a little ball with the grease zerk head on it. But when you're doing the upper on the steering right here, this steering rod, you always want to make sure you hit this front part of the leaf spring so that you don't end up double backing, okay? And I never like jumping side to side. I like going down one side and coming all the way back to the front on the other side. That way I'm sure that I went ahead and covered the entire bus. But it's the same thing. You want to get this thing nice and clean as you can. That way when you put this head on there to go ahead and pump grease into it, like I said before, you're not pumping dirt into it, okay? This one happens to be a 90, so I'm gonna pop that on right there. And same thing, give it the pumps until you hear the air bubbles stop. Okay, it'll sound like small air bubbles popping. just like that. All right, and that one's taken care of. Now on to the next ones for the steering system. Okay, well, this is the back part of the front spring, obviously, and just behind my head right here, down here, there's a grease zerk. Now this grease zerk is for the steering connecting rod, but then underneath right here on the pivot, there's another one, okay? So you got to make sure you double check. Anything that turns and pivots and moves probably has a zerk in it. So you want to make sure you look for stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and get these all cleaned up and then get them greased. So we'll do this lower one first. Like I said, just kind of put the rag on it, give it some twists, and then clean off the bottom. And basically I'll bring you in a little close so you can see kind of what you want. You basically want your grease zerk to be nice and shiny on the ball part, so that when you go ahead and pump it full of grease, like I said, you're not introducing dirt. So before I start greasing all these, I'm going to go ahead and get them all cleaned up so that they're all ready to go, and I can just move from one to the other to the other to the other. Now keep in mind on these control arms right here and all these pivot points on the axles, especially when it comes to your steering portion up here that connects to your front axle wheel bearing, they have an upper and a lower, okay? You want to make sure you get those two. Don't forget one. You want to get them both. So for now, I'm just going to do the lowers, and then I'll get into a little bit more comfortable position and I'll do the uppers. But you just pop that on just like that. You should hear a little click. Alright, there you go. Now I want you to keep in mind, if they have that little rubber boot seal on them, you're going to pump them full of grease until you see the boot barely move. If there's built up grease around it, you want that to barely move. Anything more and you risk blowing up the rubber boot that all this grease packs into to hold it all contained and clean. So let's go get this other one over here. Do the lower. There we go. Okay. Now I gotta climb in and get all wonky here for a second. Yeah, see? You can see right here. You see how much that grease is actually sticking out right there? That's about what you want at most. Okay? You don't really want much more than that, because you don't want a lot of dirt and stuff building up on it as you're driving down the road, because it pulls grease back in little by little sometimes and you can really wear out parts. Alright, so I have my upper that I got to worry about, and then my other steering rod. So I'm going to get a little bit more comfortable here for a second. So the good thing about these buses is that you can literally come and almost sit up just like that in one of the wheel wells. See what I mean? So I'm going to go ahead and clean the upper one right here, and it's the same thing as the lower. It's got a 90-degree zerk on it. And then there's one more over here on your steering knuckle on the back side of it. And I know it's hard to see down here. I know you guys really can't see that well, because if I can't see me on the camera, I know you guys can't. At least not that easily. So anyway, I got that taken care of. So now I'm going to come in over here and I'm going to pop this one on for the upper steering control arm. Give that a couple of pumps. Okay, 3 or 4 pumps is all that one needed. Do my other pivot. There we go. All right. And now, since I'm right here, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna cover this one right here, this zerk right here. And I'm gonna leave the camera. Hopefully, maybe you guys might see some grease start to expand. Now, there are 2 of these. There's an upper and a lower because this is on a shackle. On the front, it's not on a shackle on my bus. On the back, it's on a shackle to the main shackle of the frame. So you have to make sure you get them both. Don't forget one. You never want to forget one. And make sure you clean them really good. All right. Let's go ahead and get these pumped up. Pop. Whoops. Well, that's never good. My grease gun came apart. I'll just pull this off real quick. It literally came unscrewed on me. Just thread that back on, because that's never supposed to happen. You don't want that to happen anyway. Okay, there. Got that screwed back on. So now let's do the other one. Pop it in place. Give it a couple of squeeze. Okay, and that should be good. I saw the grease come out of the back over here, so I know I'm good to go. Plus, I didn't hear any air bubbles, okay? So I'm gonna get set up and move on to the next areas, check a few things, and kind of show you where you're looking for these things. Okay, so another spot you're really gonna wanna look for grease zerks happens to be in the U-joint of the drive shaft. You can see that one right there. It's that little silver dot right here on the inside. That's a grease zerk. Now, drive shaft U-joints are very, very picky, and you have to be really careful, okay? You really don't want to overpack these. So you hear bubbles, and then the second you stop hearing a lot of bubbles, you stop. Don't keep pumping them because they have seals on them, and if you blow those seals out or overpack them with grease, you'll end up with a U-joint that's gonna blow up a lot faster. All right, so I'm gonna get this one done. Now, not all carrier bearings are greasable, okay? You have to remember that. Most of them aren't, like this one. This one doesn't have a grease zerk on it, so it's really not greasable. Once it goes out, it goes out. But this U-joint right here, connecting my front drive shaft to my rear drive shaft does. You can see the little zerk right there. So it's the same thing. You're gonna wanna plug it in and only give it a couple of pumps, okay? You really don't wanna overpack these things because you really don't want a U-joint to go out. So I literally only do like 4 or 5 pumps, and that's about it, okay? So on to the next sections. So some drive shafts have what's called a spline slip, okay? It's a spline shaft just like this one right here. And usually those have grease zerks as well, just like this one. It's got one right here. And then the U-joint right in there has also got one. So like the rest of it, you gotta clean it off so that you don't introduce more dirt into the system. And with these U-joint ones, they're really hard to clean all the way around them. The most important part is, remember the little ball valve that's in them? I'll bring you in really close, hopefully you can see. There's that little itty bitty ball in the center. That's what you want to make sure is absolutely dirt free, okay? That way you don't have to worry about any dirt getting into the system. So with the spline, pop it on there. Grease it really good. All right, that should do it for that one. Now, spline shafts can take a lot of grease, okay? So don't be worried about that one. They have seals on them in some cases, but it's the same thing. You look for the seal to move. The rest of the time, they usually take a lot of grease. The U-joints, not so much. So let's get this U-joint real quick. There, and I'm going to call that good for the U-joint. Now I think I have one more U-joint on the rear pumpkin, and that's the big bulbous spot of the rear drive axle. It's got all the gearing and stuff in it, and then after that it's the rear suspension, and then I'm back over to the front suspension, and that pretty much wraps it up. So I'll be right back. Okay, so here's the rear suspension. It's on its own shackle, so it's only one zerk, and it's right up there on the side. And then you have one more U-joint zerk right here, right up against your pumpkin, okay? So this holds all your gearing and everything for your drive. So whatever your gear ratio is on your bus, that's in here, okay? And there's a different way to check the fluid on that, and I'll cover that when I get to the back side. In the meantime, I'm gonna get these cleaned up and greased. So I basically covered this portion in one of my other videos. When you go to buy a schoolie, the things you want to look for that they don't tell you about. Your rear gearbox for your rear axle on these things has a fill bolt and a check bolt, okay? Now I'm going to bring you in a little bit closer, right there, and I'm going to show you the difference between the two, okay? Now normally when you do these things, you actually have to siphon the old oil out, okay? This isn't like pull a bolt and it's gonna drain. So the way these work is, this right here is your fill screw, and this right here is your check screw, okay? Now these are retrofitted. This one has a 1/2-inch drive. This one has a 3/8 ratchet drive. So you essentially just hook your ratchet directly to it and unscrew it and remove it. Now, when you're going to fill these with fluid, you pull them both and you fill from here, and then you fill until the fluid starts dripping out right here. And once it starts dripping out, you're good, okay? Now that's the way it works with most vehicles. These are pretty much the same. A rear axle gear system is a rear axle gear system. They're just a lot bigger and they're different ratios, okay? So if you're gonna check, basically what you would do is you would unscrew this screw right here and stick your finger in and go down just a little bit. If you don't fill fluid, you're low and you need to add some, or you just need to change your fluid, okay? But in the meantime, I'm going to get this last leaf spring done on this side, and then after that I'm off to the front. It's pretty much the same stuff going all the way up the opposite side, minus the drive shaft, because I already did that on the way down. And there's no major steering components other than the cross connecting rod and the control arm itself on the axle. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up here. If you guys got any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments down below. If you liked anything about the video, leave a like on it. Share it with a friend if you would. Hit the subscribe button. That way you get all my videos that I post on every single topics that I do, and all the shorts and all that good stuff. And in the meantime, I'll see you guys later. Don't forget your notification bell, right? Peace.